Committee of the Plan Commission, and we have a quorum. There are 5 members here, and this is a subcommittee of the Plan Commission. It's not actually the Plan Commission itself. And after the subcommittee hears something, it goes to the Plan Commission, and the Plan Commission conducts a hearing and takes testimony, often under oath, from anyone who wishes to offer evidence, and takes comments from anyone who has comments, and the commissioners and others present ask questions of the witnesses. The Plan Commission is charged with making a recommendation, and there are standards in the ordinance to govern and provide a basis for the recommendation. So when we make a recommendation, we have to make findings based on the testimony at the hearing of the Plan Commission as it relates to the standards. Since all of you probably don't have the standards, and maybe none of you have the standards with you tonight, I'll just spend a moment to tell you what they are. Fortunately, not so long. So we must decide and make a statement about whether the proposed amendment is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan as adopted. We must address the standard as to whether the proposed amendment is compatible with the overall character of the existing development in the immediate vicinity of the subject property. We must talk about whether the proposed amendment will have an adverse effect on the value of adjacent properties and the adequacy of public services. And that would be standards for the map amendment, but here we're looking at a text amendment. So this committee, the Plan Commission, City Council, which can do what they want for reasons known to them. We are appointed. We must give reasons based on the standards. They are elected, and the accountability is through the election, and their process goes to a subcommittee and to a city council. So it's a long series of steps. I don't remember seeing so many people at the subcommittee before, and we will endeavor to hear you. But the people sitting in front of you don't know much about what's proposed. And I think the best way to start is for all of us to hear a short presentation from the applicant. Is there anyone here from Chase Bank? Are you able to give a short presentation? Always they can give a long presentation, but if you would use this podium, I know you're along, because we're being filmed and recorded. Yes, it's worrisome that what I say someone can look at years from now.
Sir, do we want to read the item directly to the notice?
Yes. Let me ask staff to describe the notice, the status of sending out the notice, and the item. And I think you have a microphone there.
Good evening, Dominic Argamedo, zoning planner, staff. I just wanted to read the item into the record. I am sure that we're all here, understand why we're here, but just for procedure. It's case number 11 PLND-0025, a text amendment to the zoning ordinance to amend the zoning code section 615.14.6, table 2, to remove drive-through facility from the list of prohibited uses in sub-area 6 of the Central Street Overlay District. This would allow a drive-through facility to be eligible to apply for a special use permit in this sub-area district. And once again, to give an overview of the process, a special use permit itself needs to be approved by the city council before it can be acted upon. So it would need to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals where it would be noticed, and then to the city council for it to be approved. This was noticed in the Evanston review. I don't have the exact date, but earlier at the end of September, I believe. So.
Text amendments are amendments to the ordinance that applies to the city generally. So under the applicable law, it wasn't necessary to send notices to landowners within 250 or 500 feet because it's has general effect. It's a law of general effect. The special use application triggers another set of hearings in front of a different body, and they too make recommendations to the city, and that involves a specific location and specific proposal. And there is a publication requirement and a notice requirement by mail. So it's a long, winding road before a decision can be made that would allow a drive-in facility. First, change the law to allow drive-in facilities in the overlay district as a special use, then a hearing on the special use and whether that should be granted. And the standards for that are a little different.
And again, to build on that, we don't have a special use application on file because at the beginning of the process, it was through the guidance of senior staff, and they're coming to the conclusion that's why we mailed out notices to transparency in the entire process. So thank you, and then I'll turn it over to you.
If they ask for a special use now, the answer is very simple. Under the statute, it's not one of the permitted decisions.
We could not even take the application in. So
yeah. They could, but it would be useless. So it's a long process, and tell us what triggers all this.
Sure. Well, we appreciate you, everybody, coming out tonight for this hearing. We appreciate working with the city staff to get to this point. We're proposing for the corner of Crawford and Grosse Pointe a J.P. Morgan Chase Bank facility. We have in attendance tonight several representatives from Chase Bank, several representatives from Edgemark Development, the developer for this site, as well as myself. I'm Jason Galb with New Dell Architects, and we also have a traffic consultant here in attendance that can answer any questions you might have. So right now, and I apologize if you can't see, just yell at me or something. There's an abandoned vacant gas station, a Citgo station on the corner, and we are proposing to demolish it and also incorporate the two existing lots to the west of it. And this will show you an overview. Sorry. So the red line is the proposed lot area that we are proposing to construct our new facility and parking lot on. There we go. This one's a little smaller, but this shows the new building in orange. The gray is, thank you so much. The gray area is our parking lot, and the green areas are the landscaped areas. We've worked with city staff in incorporating the Central Street overlay zoning requirements, and this is our site plan to date, meeting all those requirements. This is an elevation board of what we propose the building to look like. It's mainly bricks and cast stone with some ephes on the top portion of the building. We think this is a very attractive building and matches many other buildings in the area. So Chase is planning for a fully functional building at the site 3 drive-through lanes. That is a remote drive-through, and we are showing about 26 parking spots right now. So I don't know if there's anything else, but right now that's the initial presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Let me see first if the board has questions. Any board members have questions?
Look at the first panel you raised, we couldn't see half of it, or at least I couldn't see. Sorry.
This one?
No, the first panel you showed with the pictures, I couldn't see it.
I'm sorry.
Immediately to the west of the proposed bank building, there's currently a vacant lot. Is that right?
That is correct.
And that is for sale?
I believe that property is under contract with the developer right now.
Okay. And then there is a house immediately to the west of that.
Correct.
Now, is that also going to be purchased by the
It's under
developer?
contract as well with the developer right now.
Okay.
It's under contract with the developer. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you.
Can you elaborate what that means? Same developer, different developer?
Same developer for all 3 lots. The existing gas station has been purchased by them. They own it now. The 2 residential lots are under contract, and they will be the owners of those 2.
Okay.
And if anybody from Edgemark wants to say anything further, but they are here.
If someone from Edgemark wants to supplement this, please come forward. If not, don't come forward. We need your picture, your name, a recording of your voice, all that stuff.
Sir,
You can go right to this podium.
Good evening. I'm Will Montgomery for Edgemark Development. And yes, we have the 2 lots to the west under contract.
Other contingencies? Meaning,
Let's hold off questions first, see if the board has questions.
sorry.
Now, what I'd like to do is take comment from people who have comments and ask both of you to remain nearby, and some people may have comments and some people may have questions, and if you answer the questions, that would be great and useful, and the comments should be related to the proposed text amendment, not other stuff. So if you have comments, there's a sign-up sheet somewhere at that podium. And I'll call on people who are on the sign-up sheet, and maybe there'll be some others.
Well, I haven't passed that around, so I'm sure there are people who have comments that just haven't got to it. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Other hearings, we've just had people come up and sign in, so I'm not sure how you want to run it, sir.
Let's do it that way. Can you put paper on that one, too?
Yes, sir.
The reason we need you to sign in is because we need a permanent record and who was here and what did they say and so on and so forth. And then when we do this in front of the Plan Commission, we'll also swear you as a witness to tell the truth and so on. So if you are want to speak, come to the podium, sign your name, give some comments if you have them, evidence if you have it.
Thank you very much.
Is there a pen to sign? Perfect.
A referral to the commission. That's what I thought.
Consensus, if a consensus emerges, we pass it on to the commission.
Thanks. I'm glad you're here.
Excellent.
Change that, though. I don't know whether
how we're going to continue this evening?
Alderman Nguyen is in the library. Can you see how she feels about continuing? And it allows us to not conflate what's before the city council with what's here. So people don't make decisions on this based on that particular case. Make sure it's okay with her.
And tell them most of the people on the plan commission, we've got 60 people on the plan commission that are here tonight. You know.
Yeah, if you could check with the alderman, that would be great. No thanks. Are you ready, sir?
I am. Is it okay to hand out a couple things that I put together?
We can look at them and make them part of the record. And everyone should know that the things presented here tonight, pieces of paper, exhibits, copies or the originals should be available for the public to look at in the offices, zoning and planning office on the third floor.
Right.
Thanks. You should know this committee will make referral to the Plan Commission, and then we take testimony.
I'm aware of that.
Okay.
Thanks. Hi, my name's Aaron Opsinger. I'm from, I live on 3501 Hillside Road.
Would you spell that? It's a hard one, I think.
Double A Ron, Aaron, Noffs as in Sam, Inger. So I apologize to everybody here. I normally project and present on the wall, but I can show you my presentation if you're interested in taking a look at it. So the Chase proposal. On October 13th, we learned that something was about to happen to our neighborhood, something big. I was personally very excited about it, that this eyesore of a gas station was soon to go away and be replaced by something much more aesthetically pleasing for the neighborhood. What I found out, if you look on page 3, and that's why I have handouts because of visual reference. But what I found out, when I went to this meeting, is this proposed project was actually very big. As we talked about just a second ago, the vacant lot next door is part of it, as well as a residential house just west of there that the plan is to take that down and make that drive-through lanes, which is why we're here. On the following page, I actually took this overlay, and again, happy to show, but I pulled out a little bit wider. Sorry, you can't see this, I'm sure. But you can actually see the scale of the size of this bank and the footprint in context to the homes, the communities around it. Obviously, there's a CVS, which carries a pretty big footprint that's been there for a while, but the overall scale of that project in relationship to the buildings around it is definitely worth noting and taking a look at. On the following page, I push in then, and you see this is the overlay that was presented on the 13th, and noted that now it's from 4 drive-through lanes down to 3. But the reason for the rezoning of the vacant lot as well as the residential house to be torn down is to make room for drive-throughs. On the next page, a group of us got together after this meeting. We were a little bit taken back. We decided, maybe we should just ask some people, and maybe this is just a personal feeling that I have. Maybe other people in the community don't feel it. So we decided to make a flyer and make people aware, which I'm sure many of you have seen. On the 7th page, you see this is the actual map that we handed out the flyer to. All these streets within, north of Harrison all the way up to Old Glenview Road, east to Highland, and including the Hillside neighborhood where I live, Princeton, Thayer. There's been lots of lively conversation, as you can imagine. The red box that's over that is actually, given all the feedback we had to really focus on a particular area in terms of signing a petition. So I'm here representing the group of us that decided, hey, let's get some signatures and see what happens.
Now you need to know also, for petitions to be received, we need people who saw the signatures. So if you saw all the signing, please testify. If not, before we can take it into evidence, we'll need to have testimony from the people who actually saw it. And if you don't have those people here today, there's another meeting.
Okay. So I believe everybody who was involved in that is currently here, so they can testify. We also went to the city clerk's office, and we have it stamped and approved and been accounted for, all the signatures to date. I don't know if this is something that you need as well. I can leave it here. This is just a copy if anybody wants to take a look at it. So, the remarkable part of what we came across was in a limited time, 3 hours, 190 signatures from over 155 homes in the neighborhood are against the current Chase proposal that you just saw. These numbers grow because every day we get more emails coming in of people who are voicing concern. Only 15 people said they're hesitant to sign, which is kind of an interesting number when you think 190, 15. If you go to the next page, this is just an overshot of the current neighborhood of what I showed previously. You see the overlay of the bank. The triangle just north of that property that you see in this area that we mainly covered in this petition is only 24 houses. So when you think about 155 houses in the context of this property, there's a lot of people that are having problems with this. So of all the people we talked to, 90% of the 90% of the people we talked to who signed the petition are against and oppose the amendment to the current drive-through rule, which is what we're here to talk about, as well as 90% of the people that we spoke to were opposed to the rezoning of residential property, including the demolishing of a house for commercial use. Most, however, I have to say, and I do appreciate all the work that's gone into this project. I work in the business myself, so I understand that a lot of time and effort's been put into this. So for that, thank you for considering our community. Most, however, are still interested in a scaled-down bank proposal. We agree that the Sitco lot is an eyesore. We would like whatever it is to be contained to that lot, and we feel that the need for drive-throughs in our neighborhood just add to the risk of the community, the families, and the people around us. On the next page, the number one concern, there's basically 3 points that were pretty unified across the board, and we had a lot of dialogue. Number one concern of this area, the safety of the community and the children that play in it. Again, here's the overlay. You can see where this drive-through actually proposed is feeding into. This is an exit that actually feeds into Hillside Road. I live on the corner of this intersection. And on Hillside Road and Hillside Lane, there's a crazy surge of kids, actually. I have 2 daughters. There were 6 kids born within 6 months. And currently there are 20 kids under the age of 8 where this drive-through is supposed to feed into. I would say 16 of those 20 are under 4 years old. So they're learning to ride bikes, hanging out in the street, things like that. The proposed drive-through exit is a blind turn, and right here is an image that I took at 8:30 in the morning. You can see a line of cars, and also if you were to make a left out of this proposed exit, you cannot see northbound, or I call it northbound because you head north on whatever, westbound. You cannot see the cars coming because there's a bend in the road currently on Crawford. So this is obviously very problematic in terms of traffic flow and safety. The last point I'll make on that intersection is the school bus is currently located on that corner. School bus stop, sorry. Second concern is traffic flow and congestion in the area. And I think this was even people who were of the 15 people that we talked to and some people blogging that were for this project. Traffic flow was a major issue of the area. We've seen an increased traffic flow. I think a lot of that is due to the Starbucks that is currently on the corner of Central and Crawford having a drive-through. Someone else might speak to that and prove me wrong, but over the 3 years that I've been in that house, I've seen traffic grow pretty significantly in the area, and the feeling is that adding drive-throughs only adds to car traffic, which adds to risk. So more traffic, understandable, communities grow, it's good for business, good for government. Car traffic, people sitting in there in their cars, doing things, distracted, is dangerous, and therefore, this drive-through amendment is an issue. So This drive-through exit and parking lot entrance and exit actually are on Crawford as well. And this is a point in the road where it veers sharply left and where 2 lanes go down into 1 lane. So just to put this in perspective, on the next page, pardon my sense of humor, gentlemen, start your engines. I get stopped sometimes at this road here on Grosse Pointe at a stoplight. So anybody in the neighborhood knows that 2 cars will be side by side, and you literally have a moment to try and get in front of the next car. So because I often make a left, cars will fly around me trying to accelerate as fast as they can to get in front of me because it goes down to 1 lane just north of that. Clearly, this is an issue. That yellow sign in that image that's far in the distance, you can see that is the proposed entrance and exit to the parking lot, which will take over the vacant lot, which will feed into the drive-through. So this is on a hill. It's blind to the left, and cars are already accelerating into this area in order to make a quick right and a left, and, adds to the traffic flow issue. Lastly, on this next slide, number 23, if the decision was to make the drive-through exit right turn only, which in our last community meeting came up, I think it's an interesting idea in theory. The problem is what that will do is send traffic flow up north, and they will quickly look for the easiest opportunity to pull a U-turn to head back south. Unfortunately, that's our main artery for this neighborhood feeding into Loveless Park. It is also residential communities that already experience a tremendous amount of U-turn traffic due to the fact that as you head northwest or westbound on Crawford, you cannot make a left turn on Grosse Pointe Road. Therefore, if you look at the map here, you cannot make a left on Grosse Pointe Road, so they go onto Hillside Road and whip U-turns. I witness 20 or 30 a day in front of my house. The third concern, and I'm glad Chase is here because they could speak to this a little bit better than I can, but it's the validity of drive-throughs, drive-through bank property lasting more than 5 to 10 years. And, here's my thinking behind it. Chase currently spends $1.5 billion a year on marketing, showing how mobile technology, online banking, all can eliminate your need for a trip to the bank. It's a lot of money. So here's some quotes on the next page here. Going to the bank without going to the bank. That's a step forward. Another one, pay with your smartphone instead of cash. That's a step forward. So all these things like free online bank pay, mobile phone check deposit, all these things that you can do, the technology is changing at such a rapid rate right now that in 5 to 10 years, what happens to this property once there's no need for a drive-through? So here's a quote from, sorry, that was pretty loud. Here's a quote from Wikipedia. In recent years, there has been a decline in drive-through banking due to increased traffic congestion and the increased availability of automated teller machines and telephone and internet banking, all which Chase is leading the marketing spend of $1.5 billion. So, like I said before, what happens when Chase decides that, there's no more need for this drive-through? So simply, in closing, as I said before, 90% of the community are opposed to this drive-through amendment. Granted, this is based on our 190 signatures over 3 hours, but again, this number keeps increasing at a pretty rapid rate. And the reasons are stated on this next page. The safety of our community and the children that play on it is the #1 priority, and there are a lot of them, especially in that area. Traffic flow and congestion are mostly in mostly residential area of Evanston. It's a nice community, homes, people are out on foot traffic, strollers, bikes, just kind of it's a way of life. Everybody just hangs outside. And the last is just the final point about the validity of a drive-through bank. And if we start allowing drive-throughs and the congestion and all these things coming into our neighborhood, the fear that, this car traffic and congestion just adds to the risk of the other 2 points that we made. What's the risk that we're willing to take as a community? So thank you very much. Sorry to take so much time.
Commission have questions? I just have one.
Sure.
I heard you talking about children.
Yes.
And I didn't recall, where are they?
Okay, sure.
I thought I heard you say at the drive-through, but
Yeah.
probably they're not at the drive-through because there is no drive-through.
Yeah,
Where are
right.
they?
I currently live on Hillside Road. Hillside Road and Hillside Lane, which is just one residential street. That's where the drive-through exit is proposing feeding into. There are 20 kids under the age of 8. I would say 15 to 6 of them are under the age of 5 or 6 years old right now. And I know just from going around Thayer and Princeton and other neighborhoods that number is very similar. I just can't quantify it.
I think you mentioned that there's been a significant increase in traffic in the last couple of years. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What do you attribute that to?
So outside of looking at records, obviously we have traffic departments that see this. I'm just going off my personal feeling. I moved into the community 4 years ago, just under 4 years now. And when I first would go to work, I wouldn't have to sit behind rows of traffic. Traffic backs up pretty far these days. I think there's been a lot of changes that have happened in the area, especially in that intersection. I would say Starbucks and the drive-through has added to that congestion. I work in the marketing business. There are several of my friends that live in Winnetka that as soon as that drive-through opened, they changed their commute. They said, that drive-through is so great, I could just cruise down there, go one more street before I get on to 9094 to head downtown. So what happens, I think, it's convenience. Human beings love it.
So you're pinning this one on Starbucks principally?
I think drive-through has a lot to do with it, but I also think there's been some business and residential purchasing going on and more families and then more cars as well. So just the population boom in the area seems a little bit big in terms of kids and moms running to and from places.
Now that the gas station is out of business, have you noticed any decline as a result of that?
I think someone else could speak a little bit better to it. When I moved into the community, the gas station was already on its way out of business. It wasn't shut down, but the traffic was so minimal at that point that it was such a neighborhood gas station that you could pull in and no one was there. The people were very nice, and then you pull out. So on the meeting that we had on the 13th with the people from Chase and the developers, they talked a lot about taking the standard footprint or traffic of a gas station and comparing it to the traffic that they would get at a Chase Bank. And I'm sometimes skeptical, but in my opinion, that gas station never had traffic like a BP off of a highway or like another gas station that is in, an area where there seems to be a lot of people filling up. So it's a weird comparison to me because it was only a few cars here and there, and it was mostly residential people who knew that the gas station was on that corner. So it's a tough to say that it would have more or less if it was still a gas station, if that's what you're asking.
Did I hear you say the drive-through empties into Hillside?
The drive-through exit is across the street at the point, basically creating almost a four-lane intersection, a four-way intersection right there on Hillside.
I went over to look at the map, at the plan.
Can I point it out?
It empties into Crawford, I think.
Correct. So, do you want to borrow this? Or actually, I have a couple.
So right now, our drive-through is proposed to exit right here, and you're talking about the street up here.
Yeah, if I look at the
So it's a little south of there.
This is the street here, yeah, so it's a little south.
Okay.
But the idea of an intersection here, people turning right, intersection here, people turning left this way, and right, creates almost a four-lane stop, or a point where four streets come together.
I just needed to look. And
Sure.
Is there any other questions from the board? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Please sign in, tell us who you are, your address, and make some comments.
Thank you. My name is Janet Traska. I live at 2661 Crawford, approximately 5 houses north of the proposed Chase plan. I am also a signer of the petition. I'd first like to thank the developers for giving our hillside neighbors an opportunity to display our talents, our smartness, to engage in civic discourse, and to express our concern for economic development in Evanston, while at the same time our greater concern for our families and our homes. I am a Chase Bank customer of over 50 years. What I love about Chase is that I have about 5 opportunities to go to an ATM within 1.9 miles of my house, and probably 10 ATMs from Chase within less than a mile of my downtown office. The Citgo station is an eyesore, and I would say it puts the gross in Grosse Pointe. I would venture that none of the developers or planners or architects or anyone else would care to have that eyesore on their corner and something they look at every day. I'm especially concerned as an Evanston resident that that is right on the boundary coming into Evanston from both Wilmette on the south and from the north, and Skokie from whatever the other direction is. And your first welcome into Wilmette at that intersection is a closed down, decrepit, gross-looking Citgo station. I oppose the drive-throughs. I won't elaborate. My neighbor Aaron did an outstanding job and I think has summed up a lot of our comments. I would like to hear a little bit more about the traffic report, or have access to that even online or somehow to read. I'm very concerned that the plan calls for traffic to exit northbound on Crawford, which is a residential street, rather than onto Grosse Pointe, which is more commercial. Crawford already has a lot of traffic, often speeding. For some reason, we don't have those nice speed bumps, and we don't have those nice little stop for pedestrian things like many other areas in Evanston have. And sir, to your comment, try to get through the Starbucks between 6:30 and 10 in the morning, between 3 and 7 at night. It's really a nightmare. We're glad to have the business of Starbucks, Kenny the Cleaner, Subway, etc., but I would attribute that to a lot of the increased traffic in our neighborhood. Thank you very much. I appreciate your consideration.
I see sitting on the table in front of me a traffic report. Copies of the traffic report will be part of the record, available for public inspection in the planning and zoning offices. I believe we're not going to have testimony about traffic tonight. At a subsequent hearing, there will be testimony.
Thank you very much. Oh.
Thank you.
Should I?
Yeah, please come forward.
Is there somebody in here?
Go ahead.
I'm ready. My name is Christine Samuel. I've been a resident of Evanston since 1979 and a property owner for 25 of those years. I've owned my home on Hillside Road since 1992. When the Chase Bank organization chose the northwest corner of Grosse Pointe Road and Crawford Avenue for a drive-through facility, they undoubtedly did so innocently, not realizing that there were already unwanted traffic issues on the surrounding residential streets. The six-way intersection of Central, Grosse Pointe, and Crawford is a very difficult intersection. Already, many drivers travel through our residential streets out of confusion or impatience because of that intersection. They are seeking a way back to a main street, or a way to turn around, or a shortcut between Old Orchard Road and Crawford Avenue. They already endanger the many children who play on or around our streets, especially those on Princeton, Thayer, and Hillside Road. A non-car-centric business on the subject corner will increase traffic, of course, but a business whose purpose is to attract car traffic is not acceptable. It is a safety issue, pure and simple. And it would have an obvious adverse effect on the value of its adjacent properties. One assumes that the Chase organization would need 200 or more cars a day to make a drive-through facility economically viable. Take just 10% of those cars and add them to the existing dangers on our neighborhood streets because of driver confusion and impatience, and you can see why we property owners are protesting. The intersection of Crawford and Grosse Pointe Road is the wrong place for a drive-through. Please vote no on the proposed amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Sigrid Pilgrim, and I also speak for my husband, Alan, who unfortunately could not come tonight to attend. We have lived at 2750 Bernard Place, which just happens to be on the east side of our hillside neighbors. Bernard Place is also a one-way street, and I work in downtown Evanston. I have worked in Lincolnwood for all those many years. Trust me, I am familiar with what it is like to try and make a left-hand turn southbound on Crawford Road. We know the traffic backups on Crawford due to the Starbucks drive-through. You have already mentioned that, especially during morning rush hours. Based on my own experience, I preferably use my commute to and from work for errands, including any banking activities. And surely I'm not alone. Permitting additional drive-through businesses in the area will only increase what is already a very congested, accident-prone six-point intersection. Allow us to outline our significant concerns more specifically. As proposed, one entry and exit to the facility will be from Grosse Pointe Ridge. This possibly will require removal of the current pedestrian island, which allows safe crossing of the street, used by many commuters going to and coming from the bus stop, as one of my neighbors explained to me. People crossing the way to Lovelace Park, and generally the island being a safe stop when the traffic light changes, because it is a fairly broad street there. A second entry and exit is proposed from the northbound lanes. You call it westbound. We always talk about going north on Crawford, which also includes a second exit lane north for drive-through users. As we have established, this will be just a very short distance south of Hillside Road. What has not been mentioned yet, and of which I'm only well too aware, traffic on Crawford Avenue southbound, especially during evening hours or any time there is an accident, a tie-up, or a slowdown on Edens, is backed up to Old Glenview Road, and I have seen it backed up all the way to Wilmette Avenue. So making a left-hand turn or south on Crawford from the proposed bank exit is dangerous and likely cause even more accidents that already occur at the six-point intersection. It has already been mentioned that the bend on Crawford Road and parked cars on the east side will also lead to additional traffic hazards. When cars exit the drive-through, they may have to swerve quickly to avoid parked cars because they won't be able to see that the cars are there. Prohibiting parking for residents who live there seems to be penalizing them in favor of a business interest. And it also begs the question, where should those people then park their cars? Perhaps on Hillside, perhaps on Thayer, all of which are dead-end streets. It's been proposed to prohibit a left-hand turn from the bank, directing traffic to go north only. This will leave drivers who want to go south on Crawford or anywhere on Central Street with no option to use Hillside Road West, as has already been described, which is a dead-end street and which is already too often used for U-turn by cars northbound on Crawford wanting to go west on Grosse Pointe. I actually witnessed that Monday night, right in front of my car. Some car was coming northbound on Crawford, zoomed around because they wanted to go west on Grosse Pointe. Another alternative would be to use Thayer eastbound, which is a dead-end street, to turn around, and then necessitating, of course, a left-hand turn onto Crawford. And we just talked about the left-hand turn on Crawford during business or rush hours, right? Another option would be to go east on Clifford, which just also happens to be a dead-end street ending in the park. You could turn around, make a left-hand turn onto Crawford, which I do several times a day, and I've just told you it is no fun. It took me about 5 minutes to get out of Clifford, make a left-hand turn to come here tonight. So none of these turning south alternatives are appropriate given the small residential neighborhood streets populated with families and children. Additionally, these small streets all lead to Lovelace Park. There are young mothers pushing strollers, preschoolers riding trikes, older siblings on bikes and roller skates, joggers, elderly people walking their dogs, and you should see the street in the winter when everybody goes sledding there. All area residents who would be severely impacted given the lack of viable traffic flow alternatives for drivers wishing to go south on Crawford if the prohibition for a drive-through facility is lifted. Surely there can be alternatives to this much too large bank proposal, which also makes us question the need for that many drive-through lanes, given recently introduced banking technologies. I just happen to work downtown on Grove at 990 Grove, which happens to also be across the street from a Chase Bank, the drive-in facility, which has 6 lanes. There wasn't a single car in there today as I was walking towards the parking lot where I keep my car on the Sherman garage. With 2 Chase Bank locations and 3 ATMs in Evanston, SIP 60201, is there really a need for this large development, which will so negatively affect local residents? Take out 2 residential lots in the alley serving one of our city's most beloved establishments, Sarkis. I hear some people like Sarkis. Of course, we do not know what the real interests are behind this proposal and whether this text amendment and intended zoning change are just the first of many more to come in this corner of Evanston. And I was one of the people who passed around the petitions in my neighborhood. There were 3 houses which I was not able to.
Do you think it's likely there'll be additional petitions before the next meeting?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Perhaps with the petitions, we'll just wait till the next meeting, and people can mark the petitions, mark on the pieces of paper which signatures they saw. Otherwise, we will do this multiple times and spend long periods of time on the petitions. If that's all right. If you don't plan to come again, then we should do it tonight.
I think you should proceed with all of it. People who want to contribute.
Now, we've just had 7 minutes of testimony on traffic, duplicating in part prior testimony on traffic and prior testimony on traffic. I see a lot of people here. If we go 7 minutes, it will be 2 a.m. unless some give up. So I'm going to ask if someone has already given testimony that's the same as yours, just say you agree, so that we can finish this meeting. The board can decide whether to refer it to the Plan Commission, and at the Plan Commission we'll take, again, testimony. Some people who aren't here will be making decisions at the Plan Commission, and they'll need to hear what you say. So I'm trying to save us some time by avoiding duplication and try and get a medium between time to listen to all the citizens and efficiently finishing this meeting, knowing that the next meeting is the hearing, assuming that it gets referred there. Sir?
I'm Stuart Raskin. I live at 2710 Crawford, which is about a 5-minute walk from the proposed location. I've lived at that house for 32 years. My wife was able to sign the petition. I did not have the opportunity to sign the petition, but would gladly do so. I second and third what my neighbors have stated so far. I think our problem isn't one of having the gas station replaced by a Chase branch, but I think it's one of the absolute scale and character of the proposed of the proposal.
Thank you.
I'll be brief as well. I'm Barry Isaacson. I live at 3428 Park Place, so I bring a little bit different perspective here. My property, as well as the neighbors on either side, are contiguous to this proposed drive-through. The division now is a 6-foot residential fence. And our assumption is this drive-through is going to be 24/7, which means it's going to be lit all night. And so our concern is, my family's concern as well, is that we may end up living in a veritable parking lot. I don't know what the plans are in terms of separate fencing for this development, but I thought I'd express that concern, is that we're as close to this property, we are contiguous to this property, in fact. So our issue is a little bit different. Also, I don't know if it's appropriate to ask a question, but there's an easement running just beyond our fence, running parallel to the fence. I don't know if that's factored into plans, or does that mean there'll be a setback if this development is built?
I don't have answers for that question. I would anticipate that at the Plan Commission hearing, there'll be very detailed testimony, including testimony on lighting, berming, fencing, and how the neighbors will be protected from headlights and continuous traffic, or not protected. But we'll have that information at the next meeting.
Thank you. Jeff Smith of 2724 Harrison, and I may be one of the only people in Evanston who actually carries around a copy of the current text amendment to sub-area 6 on my laptop. But that's because, Commissioner Opdyke, you remember we spent a lot of time talking about the Central Street Master Plan when I was president of the Central Street Neighbors Association, and in particular, there's a transcript that goes on for many pages of a little over 4 years ago, where we were all sitting together in a room talking about in this intersection in some great length with then zoning administrator Dunkley, and it's kind of ironic to be back here 4 years later, because at that time the city was pushing for an upzoning and not wanting to give on it being, B2. It finally got compromised with being B1A, but with the height of a B2, and the trade-off, if you will, being that there were large setbacks at that intersection. But we spent a great deal of time, and I sort of feel like many people are no longer around who remember that, and frankly, there was not a lot of public participation from the west end of Central Street there, but the Central Street Neighbors Association was then fighting for the residents around and for future residents to prevent overdevelopment of what was then already a problem with the Citgo, and the adjacent vacant lot. The house had just recently been torn down, were identified as development opportunities. Before I go on, because I don't want to speak out of turn, I do have a question. It's not apparent to me whether the 30-foot setback from the pedestrian area is incorporated into the plan. It looks like the building is.
We have the 15-foot wide sidewalk and the 15-foot green area.
Okay.
Both Crawford and Grosse Pointe.
Okay, and is that from the lot line, or is it from the curb?
The curb.
Okay, you might want to check and see if they may not be the same. So, now my second question for staff or commissioner, anybody who can answer this, is this text amendment just applying to the portion of the proposed development site that's in the sub-area 6 that is covered by the overlay district, or is part of the text amendment to also rezone the R2 vacant lot?
The text amendment covers sub-area 6. The map amendment for those residential properties will be at the Plan Commission. All text amendments start here at the Zoning Committee level. Map amendments start at the Plan Commission level and do not start here at the Zoning Committee.
So technically, we're not talking about the map amendment here tonight.
There'll be no on the map amendment tonight, correct?
Right. The reason that's relevant, obviously, because just the text amendment to Overlay District 6 won't allow construction of the development that's shown. You also have to have the map amendment to get a drive-through onto what's now an R zone lot, which in my memory is unprecedented. Now, I've only been in the Central Street neighborhood for 21 years, but when I moved there was one drive-through. There are now 4 drive-through facilities. You've got First Bank and Trust. You've got Harris Bank, which didn't used to be there. You've got the Starbucks, and I guess this would be the 4th one. When I moved there, this intersection had 2 gas stations. What's now the Starbucks Cellular One. Old timers will remember used to be an auto repair place that also sold gas, and you had the Citgo, which I believe was something else before the Citgo before then. So there's always been a lot of traffic, and it's always been a high-velocity, relatively dangerous intersection. I won't repeat what's been said, but for the new commissioners, there was a lot of testimony on this 4 years ago, and that's why we ended up with the sight lines. A drive-through per se is not inconsistent with the prior use as a gas station. If it was to be a gas station, you'd probably have more people coming in and out all day than you would with a drive-through bank. However, a drive-through is not consistent with the vision of the intersection, and this was strongly agreed upon by staff, by the Lakota Consulting Group, by the unanimous vote of the Plan Commission, by the City Council, that this intersection is a gateway to Evanston. The covering of an entire residential lot with pavement has issues that go beyond the text amendment before you hear now, but seeing as we still have time, this is in the development stage. I'm glad to see the green space preserved because there are water issues related to that particular property. The Citgo is actually about 4.5 feet higher than the vacant lot to the next of it. The reason a Weeping Willow is doing so well there is because all the water gets funneled towards there. Even though it's the high point for the region, you've got, in effect, currently a bioswale there. The Central Street Neighbors has not had time, since we heard about this coming forward, to take a formal position on this, but about half dozen of us did meet with Alderman Tendem, who was kind enough to set up a meeting on relatively short notice right before he was going out of town. And these are our main concerns, is that the sight lines be preserved, that you think not just about this project, but other projects and the other properties. The problem with the text amendment that eliminates drive-through as a prohibited use is that it goes at the one prohibited use in all of the Central Street Master Plan. There are actually 7 overlay areas, and 5 of them have drive-through as a prohibited use. It was something that came up over and over again. The consultants said, "Oh, we don't." The consultants didn't even want front parking for businesses, and so drive-throughs were taken out of 5 different areas. If you take out a drive-through for this property through a text amendment, you're taking it out for all of sub-area 6, which means that not only could this become a drive-through, but Sarkis could become a drive-through, and the little dentist office, could become a drive-through. The psychologist's office, you could have an intersection consisting of all sorts of drive-throughs. So I think that's a very strong consideration for this commission to think about as it's evaluating this. If you do it just for this property, it ends up being spot zoning, and if Mr. Dunkley had said 4 years ago, why aren't we putting this vacant lot into the Central Street overlay plan? I don't know the answer to that, but that's where the boundary was drawn. So the problem is if you extend ultimately this development to that parcel and you make that R2 into a B1A, that would be the ultimate in spot zoning, because you'd have a B1A that's not covered by the Central Street plan or the overlay district, and it would be the only parcel in town, I believe, that would be a B1A that's not so covered. So the Central Street Neighbors, I believe, will, certainly the people who were at that meeting, believe strongly that you shouldn't take over or convert that particular parcel without also extending the protections for residents and the character of the neighborhood of the Central Street plan to any rezoned B1, B1A. You can't just look at this current project, but how it affects future projects on this site and others. We thank you for your time. This I don't think will take as long as the overall rezoning, but I just do point out that this is going the exact opposite direction where we were pushed 4 years ago. There have been changes in the economy, obviously, but the Central Street Neighbors Association at the time said this is it already was an auto-oriented intersection. We thought it was unlikely that there would be large condo development opportunity there. So if you do make these changes, I hope somebody will say, well, we were wrong and the Central Street neighbors were right. But I don't expect that to be written into the ordinance. Instead, I'm hopeful, as always, that the interests of those who live around will be given extreme, if not primary, consideration, because they're the ones that have to live with the costs of all the benefits that the city of Evanston and the larger community might enjoy from any such rezoning. Thank you.
I will mention that in addition to the map amendment and text amendment, each parcel that would want a drive-through needs a separate special use. So even if the map amendment and text amendment passes, it doesn't mean the little dentist can have a drive-through. Although the thought of drive-through dentistry is, well, but I mean, there's a lot of pieces here.
If I might, Commissioner Peters, all I can say is that I see special uses fly through the City Council on the consent agenda without people sometimes even knowing about them. I've seen the City Council, as you mentioned, overrule the Plan Commission on so I just don't regard that as a lot of protection for the residents. And this is the front line. This is where folks are fighting now. Thanks.
We'll get notice before the hearing. Thank you. Sir?
Thank you. That's it.
Oh.
I think you were first. Please. We haven't heard from that side for a while. My name is Jean Birkenstock, and I live at 3626 Thayer Street. I've lived there for 35 years, and I've seen the Thayer Street and the Princeton Street residents change over the years. The older people got older and moved away, and younger people moved in with little children. Thayer Street is the way for the neighborhood to get to Lovelace Park, and they go by our house all the time, adults, babies, and winter and summer. And I'm very concerned about the increased traffic on Crawford and the confusion that you all seem to think the drivers are going to have about how to get out of there. And I'm worried about the little kids.
Sir? Now I think you're next.
Thank you. My name is Jacques Chatain. I live on Greeley. That's the little street at the end of Central itself. I've been there for over 20 years, and I'm a Chase customer. I don't understand why our street, North Evanston of Central, has to start and stop with the same bank. I don't feel underserved at all. I see banks coming and going. I've been part of the design team that's put up 2 banks in the last few years on Central, and they're gone already, Banks of America. Things move very quickly. I'm concerned long-term that this property leaves the whole site. The gas station always said they're going to put residential property there. The owners said that for the many years that they were in decline. To lose the other properties, this is a real treasure of Evanston, a block where you can get to our treasured Lovelace Park without crossing any streets. I think this should be preserved for families. It's a unique setting. And people have talked about the traffic. It is totally impossible now to get out of the western part of Central Street. People have testified to it in other directions. It's a disaster. We blame the zoning committee for letting Starbucks go in there because it just doesn't work at all. And to have another drive-in here is just bad. We're overpopulated. One of the reasons I was particularly concerned about this building is I'm tired of seeing lot line buildings go up. The same thing happened at the intersection of Crawford and Main Street, where they put a pharmacy that put its back to the intersection there. That was a pleasant old Tenenbaum's hardware store, and a building like this is just dominating visually. This isn't what we want in a residential neighborhood, which is what this is.
Hi, my name is Kim Ferrer. I live at 2636 Crawford. My house is located directly across the street from the proposed drive-through. I'll start by saying that I'm highly against the current proposal, not of having a bank on the corner. I think that would be great to clean up the lot, but 100% agree with all the neighbors that have spoke today. I could repeat everything you said because everyone is completely accurate. I sit at my dining room table and watch the backups on Crawford on a daily basis. The one thing I can say that no one said as of yet is living on Crawford, where I do, I have a lot of trouble getting in and out of my driveway. I have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old that I really don't let play in the front yard because Crawford's such a mess. We actually go around the corner to Hillside, so we play with Aaron's kids. And so I just, the thought of adding a drive-through with the entry and exit where it's currently proposed is really upsetting to me because I feel like it's such a dangerous area to begin with, not only for the kids, but for me pulling in and out of my personal driveway. It just doesn't seem like the right choice. I'm also highly against changing the residential areas, but I'll go into that on the next meeting, and I'll save my breath for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Thank you and good evening. My name is Jim Kirby. I live at 2665 Crawford. Have been there for 2 years. I have a couple of points, especially to the standards that were talked about earlier. I understand how this process works. For full disclosure, I'm a licensed architect in the state of Illinois. I'm also one of those sustainability guys. So we have a lot of issues with the size of what you're doing, the impermeableness of what you're doing, the drive-through, the lighting, changing the character, which is what really is what I'm here to speak about. One of the standards was compatibility with the character of the subject property. That corner, that neighborhood is extremely low-rise, residential. It always has been, and it should be for a very long time. B-2A, 1-2A, whatever it is, I think allows, is it 3 feet or 30 feet or 3 stories? I think either one of those is too high. So I think changing the character of that neighborhood is ultimately critical and I think is problematic. And I think that's the initial problem with what the developers want to do. Some backup on that is I absolutely avoid the Starbucks drive-through. It is the closest one to my house. I could get it absolutely quick. If anybody wants to see my dedication, ridiculous, to Starbucks, it's what I live for. I don't go to that one because the drive-through is awful. I expect to pay more in car damage than I do at Starbucks if I go to that drive-through. Adding more drive-through lanes is a problem in that neighborhood, all right? I walked the lot last night. It is marked very nicely at 2-foot intervals with little short white lines. You guys have been out there beating this in front of us before this happened. I'm very disappointed that these 2 lots are under contract. Please. You're putting the cart before the horse. You clearly don't give a shit about the neighborhood. So, pardon my French.
Sir, can I ask
scale
you
back
to address the board?
Through the board to them.
No.
I am addressing them.
Address the board. We're not doing cross-examination. Just the board needs to
I'll save
hear
that
your
for
comments.
next time then. So the character will be ruined, a drive-through is a hazard, all that good stuff. They know. They can do a LEED Platinum building on the corner if they'd like. That'll come up next.
Thank you. Sir?
Hi, my name is Joshua Huppert. I live at 2630 Crawford. I know this is about the text amendment, but obviously it's about a particular project, and the particular project, it would be right across the street. I'd be right dead center to the right and the left from that project. I agree with what's been said about traffic, so I won't say it again. And the guy from Central Street Neighbors, thank you. I'm sorry we didn't know you were working on this 4 years ago. I should have been there. Thank you for what you've done. I'd like to, so I'm not repeating, I just want to go a little bit through the application that was made for the text amendment and respond to the different points. The first one is it's an application to delete drive-through facility as a prohibited use from the table of prohibited uses. But I looked at the table of prohibited uses, and there's only one prohibited use in it, is drive-through. So it's not something that slipped into a list of 100 things. The city obviously knew what it was doing and specifically, deliberately prohibited drive-throughs in this area. And then on the second page of the application, the question is the proposed amendment consistent with goals and objectives and policies of the comprehensive general plan? And the developer's answer is yes, sub-area 6 is adjacent to sub-area 1 on 3 sides where there is no prohibition to drive-through facilities. I think that proves the opposite point. If the city wanted sub-area 6 to be the same as sub-area 1, they wouldn't have made a sub-area 6. If they didn't want the prohibition on drive-throughs, they wouldn't have put it in sub-area 6. It was done for a reason. And that law was only made, I think, 4 years ago or something. It's a new law. And it says right in the form, this whole procedure, this process is to make adjustments necessary in light of changed conditions or changes in public policy. So in 4 years, I don't think changes or policy I don't see where they've changed enough to reverse a decision that was just made. It's not an accident that drive-throughs are prohibited. And then the next question in the form is the proposed amendment compatible with the overall character of existing development in the immediate vicinity of the subject property? If so, how? The same answer is given. Sub-area 6 is surrounded on 3 sides by sub-area 1. So my answer is the same. They went to the trouble to divide it up into sub-areas and prohibit drive-throughs, so there must have been a reason. They talked about the traffic. There's a good reason. Then the next question, will the proposed amendment have an adverse effect on the value of adjacent properties? Of course it will. My house at 2630 Crawford is the last house in the R2 district. Across the alley from me is an auto repair shop. That's not great. You know, being on a busy corner is not great. And being across from a gas station is not ideal. But when I look out my front window or when I stand on my porch, I look at residential property. I can kind of see the gas station, but I look at 2635 Crawford, where somebody tore down a house. I look at 2637 Crawford, where there's a nice house. I'm in a residential district. If this project goes through, to be not only next to an auto repair shop, I'll be completely across the street from business. I'll be like a sore thumb sticking out in the middle of a business district. So, of course, that's going to have an adverse effect on the value of my property. The other thing is that it seems like it's a dangerous area. That's been talked about. My wife doesn't drive. She used to ride a bike to work. She was pretty badly injured by somebody opening a car door in front of her on Central Street. It's dangerous to ride a bike and it's dangerous to walk around there. But it's been getting better in the last few years, and the city's done some really good things. I think the bike lane on Central Street is not perfect, but it's an improvement. The changes in the traffic light at the 6-way intersection have improved things, and they kind of bumped out the curb in front of the CVS. It's safer to cross the street than it used to be. And the city, I think, has made it pretty clear that the intention all along that part of town is to make an area that's friendly for pedestrians and bicyclists and not only for drivers. But a drive-through tells you, just drive. Just don't even get out of your car. Just drive. And I suspect that's part of the reason it was prohibited in the area. And it's not only the traffic that's been talked about, but the message that it sends about the character of the neighborhood and what the city is about. Are we going to go with a place where you can ride a bike and walk, or are we going to go with the place that's only for drivers? And the drive-through tells you it's for drivers, and I don't see any reason to change this recently made law. Thank you.
I'd like to ask for 3 to 4 minutes. I'll recap just one or two things that has been said tonight, but I actually brought my watch, so I was trying to say below. I'm Ben Hamelev. I'm a Hillside resident. I live at 2637 Hillside Lane. I've been there for 11 years. I help collect signatures, and what I'd like to do is ask Chase Bank if you can bring out one of your maps there for my help, please. There's one in particular I'd like. You have one that's very good. All right. What I'd like to do is just show you just a couple of things that are very, very complex to understand.
Step closer to the microphone so everyone can hear you.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
You hear me okay?
The problem is the recording.
Yeah. What I'd like to do is just point out one or two things that are very, very complex to understand if you don't live here and walk here every day. But for 11 years, I have walked exactly from the mouth of Hillside, which would sit here, over to this point here where the new exit will come out. Number one point I'd like to make is...
Pick up the microphone. Would you hold it close to your mouth so we get a good recording of your testimony?
Hello? What I'd like to point out is one very complex thing if you don't live here all the time. This exit is new. Down here at the corner lot is where the old existing gas station exits would have been. This one is new. That sits in the middle of the two residential lots. It's one point that has not been highlighted so far. The second point I want to make is that as you come out here, there was a lot of conversation about this being a blind spot. The blind spot is to this way up to the north. It makes the exit this way out and left down extremely dangerous. The conflict is that those who then will turn right to stay safe will come up and either make a right onto Hillside, or they'll go further up and make a U-turn up on Thayer. They may make a U-turn and come down Princeton through Central, but what will happen is that there's a question that Chase has not answered in its proposal. They have not done away with what will happen to the traffic that comes out from the drive-through exit only. As you can see, this drive-through is only one way. You do not round about on the property itself. That means that those who sit here, once they're cleared their drive-through, they only have a choice of either making a dangerous left into a blind spot or go north and end up in the local residential streets. I wanted to highlight that. Another point I'd like to highlight is that the building has now been brought out to the corner. And I'd like to ask for Chase's thought, not necessarily for answers tonight, but for its thought, if they've ever given any consideration to the limited visibility that would result from bringing the building out to the corner, whereas right now the old gas station sits in here by Sarkis. So not only do we already have a dangerous intersection down here at the 6th corner, but the building going out to this corner makes that whole situation even exacerbated by the potential for limited visibility at this corner. I think that Chase has actually made an oversight traffic-wise in proposing this exit here. And I think that the reason we are having such an overwhelming response of 90% of those residents that we reached, and remember, we did not know of this proposal coming up until 2 weeks ago. But as the gentleman that just spoke 1 or 2 minutes before me pointed out, when you walk the Citgo gas station tonight, and because I walk there every night, I saw those paint stripes several weeks ago. I thought at first it was graffiti, right? I'm not in this kind of business of city planning or landscaping or what it's called. But what I'd like to point out is those stripes were on those parking lots before you met with the residents. And you nodding, and that is an acknowledgement. I'd like to just make sure that's clear.
We had to have a survey done before they purchased the gas station, so there was markings out there.
That's not survey.
I would like to just continue on by pointing out that that is clear, that those stripes that were systematically put on the gas station weeks and weeks ago were made before Chase met with residents that live across the street. And then lastly, I'd like to say, I am not in the commercial business of real estate planning or anything like that. But if I speak to someone who's in the industry, they would say for you guys to come this far with a project, you may have had 3 to 6 months before you contacted initially on this project. You will be able to tell yourself from your own records when you first made verbal inquiries, when you began to strike your deals, when you began your modeling.
Let me ask you to address the standards, which don't include when they began to talk to neighbors.
Okay, I accept that.
I appreciate it.
But to the city, there will, for those of us who are here tonight, there will be a record, and we have not asked for Freedom of Information Act yet on the process, but there will be a record of when the city was first contacted. And all I'm wanting to point out is that we have only had 10 business days to come up with our thoughts on this. The bank has had at least a lead time of 6 months, and yet there is a blunder. Can I have this up again? There is a traffic blunder in this exit up here, and I think there's an overwhelming concern that has been risen in the neighborhood, and that's why you've never seen this many people before, because there's either a dangerous risk of a high accident that would be at least 40 to 35 miles each car, or you have a U-turn risk that puts the traffic into the neighborhood. That's the key point I wanted to make. I also have a handout that takes you through what I just explained. There's one for each member of the committee. And then I'd like to give you also a copy of our flyer.
Can you give a copy to staff also?
Yeah.
Thanks. The good news is there's another meeting, and under the rules, a neighborhood organization can get a continuance so that you have sufficient time.
Well, I think I got the points made that I was hoping to get made. I think I'd like to sum it up by saying that 90% of those reached were against the proposal, and that is overwhelming considering that we started from scratch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Chris Hobbs. I live at 3510 Hillside. First, Mr. Commissioner, I apologize for interrupting earlier. I got a little excited. I just have a couple quick points to make tonight. The very first is just to reiterate the Central Street Master Plan, the amount of time and effort that was put into that and the findings they came up with, specifically that for the property that used to be zoned C2, that's now B1A, that it be pedestrian-friendly, retail, potentially residential space. My understanding of this meeting is that it is for the text amendment, and the petition that we brought specifically states that all of the signatures are against the text amendment, which is my understanding of what this meeting is for. So I think that petition actually is valid and shows in a very short period of time that 155 different households, predominantly within 500 feet of this area, are against drive-throughs on any of these properties, not just Chase's proposal, on any of the properties. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jump in, had one more comment. No one's mentioned it, so I thought I'd add it. Just scribble my name in. Hi, My name is Allison Cook, and I live at 2721 Thayer Court, which is about a block up Crawford from the proposed development. And I wholeheartedly agree with what my neighbors have said tonight, and I'm just so excited to be living next to you, all of you, and so proud of our community. The one item that no one mentioned, excuse me, is that the Evanston Office of Sustainability's website has stated that our community is not meeting federal air quality standards. That means that our air currently is not safe to breathe. And as we all know, cars contribute to air pollution. Building a 3-lane drive-through, as everyone has said, is going to, excuse me, draw cars into our community. Is going to increase air pollution, and I oppose this change to the zoning ordinance. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to be heard on this tonight? Can you reiterate the dates for the next meeting?
Dominic Argametho, staff, as you stated previously, this is a subcommittee of the Plan Commission. The zoning committee of the Plan Commission meets once a month. The Plan Commission meets once a month. The next regularly scheduled meeting of the Plan Commission is for November 9th at 7 p.m. in this room. So.
Thank you.
Is that to consider the text amendment or also the other reason?
The text and the map amendment, but not the special use, which won't be addressed until, I should say addressed,
in theory,
until there is a text and map amendment change. If there is no text and map amendment, then we can't consider, the zoning board can't consider the special use. I want to thank all of you for coming, for your patience generally, for your testimony, for your patience in listening to me, and especially I want to thank the alderman for being here to listen tonight. We'll take a 5-minute recess before we go to the next item on the agenda. There is pending in the city hall, in the city council. Thank you.
Are you coming on to the next? Aaron, this is Aaron. Would you like to I haven't had a chance to get it. I bet you can get several. Anybody sign a petition?
November 9th meeting, right? Oh, I thought he said it was Mount Anton.
Let me make it clear. We are going to talk about it and make a decision about referral, just not take more testimony. So if you want to watch the discussion, which may be short or long, you're welcome to stay. I'm sorry I was not clear. And I thank staff. They always keep me honest and more accurate. But we still should take a 5-minute break.
there a separate issue that they're going to be working on today, or just?
There's another issue we'll be talking about, the ownership for the bed and breakfast. We had a proposal. I'm not the chair, but I would recommend. Yeah, so, okay.
I thought for a second you
I signed it, but you were in front of the house on Monday, but no one saw me. Do I have to sign again? Should I do it just to be sure?
Sure, yeah.
Because you were, I knocked and.
Part of kid wrangling.
Right.
Point of views that are all 2006.
Right, exactly.
Hi, I wanted to.
Yeah.
I was asked to put this together a couple of years ago when another proposal came up. Well, this was, I mean, this was 4 years ago, but 2 years ago, I wanted to start cutting it.
Aquarium stuff.
Well, and the little rain yeah, they do car testing, but they're actually pretty.
But they're pretty good about it. I've watched them. I mean, I take my car too, but
They're pretty good.
I've seen them come around. They don't come whizzing around.
You know what gets me is Evanston and realized.
They go on out on the
Sometimes I stood
then the city
I'm sure something will happen. I need to take it unless they kill this.
When I take it,
Chance already has access to who has Chase Capital.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean.
Still continuing Boulevard, how likely are you to be? Some four little survey.
Will be interesting about this meeting because when I'm learning how the process is evolving to me, like each stage is about a particular point of this project. So there will be some points where that will come up. So coming out of this meeting, I'm guessing they're going to redraw it. Or do something. They may like it.
The Plan Commission is back in session. We are discussing whether to make a recommendation that the Plan Commission zoning subcommittee is in session. We're discussing whether to make a recommendation to the Plan Commission that they look at the proposed text amendment. And then the commission would discuss it and hear evidence and address the standards. Is there discussion? There is no discussion. Wow.
I think we should pass it on to the Plan Commission.
Can you say it louder in the mic?
Sir, just for clarification purposes, Dominic Argamello here, zoning staff. To be honest, in the 3 years we've had zoning committee, I've spoken to an audience usually of one or two. So we haven't had that many controversial aspects. And I just want to clarify procedures. I also staff the Zoning Board of Appeals. And as I was explaining to a citizen, even if a proposal comes before the zoning committee, zoning board of appeals, special use, and it's denied, since it's not the determining body, it still goes forward. It's just a recommendation. And I'm just wondering.
That is also true with the Plan Commission.
Right. And the zoning committee doesn't have the authority to so much kill something as they just, whether they are recommending or commenting on it as it goes forward to the Plan Commission, which is also not the determining body the City Council is, just for clarification.
I think you are correct. We may make recommendations, but here the standards have not been addressed, and the testimony of the applicant is not complete. And I think the testimony of the neighborhood association and the neighbors is not complete. So I recommend to the commission we forward it to the Plan Commission so a complete hearing can be, a complete record can be developed, and the Plan Commission can make their recommendations to the City Council, and then the City Council can make their decision for subcommittee and City Council. Stuart?
I would agree. I don't think there's anything that the committee can accomplish that the Plan Commission cannot accomplish. I mean, eventually it's going to end up in the lap of the Plan Commission, and we'll take sworn testimony, and we'll have a full complement of members at the Plan Commission meeting. I mean, there's a lot of ground to cover, and I don't think for 1 minute that that any decision will emerge after one meeting before the Plan Commission. I have a feeling this is going to take 2 or 3 meetings in front of the Plan Commission, but that's a guess just based on my experience. But I think we ought to move it on to the Plan Commission.
Other comments?
I agree with you, Stuart, and with you, Commissioner Peters, that we should push this forward. If this was a topic 4 years ago in front of the Plan Commission, where the discussion of drive-throughs resulted in whether they were permitted or not, then I think it has to be revisited at this time.
I am asking staff to see if they can find the date of the prior hearings, scan the transcripts, and make them available to the public and the commission, and the aldermen, of course.
That would be very helpful if we could zero in on those transcripts, and if you could put that online for us.
It's wonderful to reinvent the wheel, but not always sufficient.
Yes, we will definitely comb through our transcripts for this. As it is recently, we do have several players that were involved in that discussion, but just to be reminded of the discussion certainly will be very helpful for everyone. I just also want to speak to the public. All information can be found at, we'll try to put this online. We'll put it online. But we can also information can be found at the planning office. We do have a traffic impact analysis that has been submitted that will be available. We'll try to get that up online. We just have hard copies right now, but it is definitely available at the zoning office to make copies and to look through. Same thing with the original text amendment application. So please contact the zoning office for that type of information. And any questions you have on the process. I definitely understand how this is not can be just a little confusing labyrinth, but we'll try to make it as clear as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Then I just had one other question, although I think I know the answer. We would then, at the Plan Commission, be taking up both the map amendment application and the application to amend the overlay, correct?
That is
So
correct.
The whole kit and caboodle of what the Plan Commission would do would start at the next meeting.
That is correct. It's all map amendments, and the map amendment we keep referencing is for the two residential properties to the northwest of the corner lot would be discussed at the Plan Commission level. This is also talked at the Plan Commission level. The Plan Commission then makes a recommendation to City Council, and it goes forward negative or positively because the City Council is the determining body in both cases.
And then one other thing, it wouldn't make any sense, I don't think, to have a joint meeting with the zoning board because of the way it progresses, that the Plan Commission makes recommendations, they go to City Council. If the City Council then decides to change the overlay district, then an application would be made to the zoning board.
I think that is absolutely correct.
It's really up to the City Council, depending on what they determine. It could then go to the zoning board, up to the City Council.
Correct.
Correct? Okay.
Correct. And I think in a hypothetical situation, I understand about efficiency, but say for some reason, again, in a hypothetical that the City Council decides to allow drive-throughs in this area, but there comes a consensus that the neighborhood has decided instead of 3-lane drive-throughs, maybe a 1-lane, but no exit off such and such, the design of it could change such in the future that having a joint hearing between the Plan Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals
Makes no sense in this particular context.
Right. I think we need to do at the macro level as the citizens, as has been discussed tonight, whether this is should be an even eligible area for a drive-through right there.
Does anyone have questions about procedures and future procedures? Ma'am?
I just have a real quick question. If your subcommittee has really or any decisions you might make, really no weight in terms of the ultimate outcome of anything,
why are we here?
It's very diplomatic and not be offensive about it.
You are very polite, thank you. Sometimes the matters are really complex, and there are lots of things that interact together, synergistically and anti-synergistically. And we might have in the subcommittee, and there are several subcommittees, we might have a lot of meetings to try to deal with the technical problems. In this case, the question of removal of the prohibition, we all know what that is. And it's integrally tied in some respects to the map amendment. So your question is apropos. But the procedures say that a text amendment should come here for discussion, and usually there's a lot more. And then it goes to the whole commission. It's I won't say we chew on it a lot when it's complex, but we try to work out the problems. And sometimes the problems is the wording right? Is the text is a lot of words? Is it clear? All those kinds of things takes a long time. So that's why there's a subcommittee.
May we have this gentleman's name and contact information, please?
Yes, definitely. The only reason I'm hesitating is because actually Friday is my last day. But I will tell you that the person who...
Craig, could you come in and introduce yourself?
This will be the gentleman that will be taking over, and he can introduce. Yeah, he's been listening the whole time.
Sorry, I'm in two meetings running concurrently. My name is Craig Sklenar. I'm the general planner for the city, and I will be taking over on zoning issues for a little while we try to fill a position. And we thank Dominic for his service.
But he will also be the staff member for the Plan Commission.
My contact is CSKLENAR@cityofevanston.org. And if you want to give me a phone call, that's fine too. 847, I'm probably opening a can of worms here, 448-8683.
Dennis, just for completeness, can you identify yourself for those who don't know you?
Dennis Moreno, I'm the manager of planning and zoning for the city. I was here for the first 35 minutes, and then both Craig and I got pulled down the hall to the Economic Development Committee to give a presentation on something totally unrelated. But I staffed the neighborhood meeting that Alderman Tendem organized a couple weeks ago and met several of you there. So I'm very familiar with the project, and certainly we'll take a look at the record for that part of tonight I missed. Dennis Marino, Marino.
Are you at dmarino@cityofevanston?
Yes.
The good news is if you call the main number, they will recognize the names.
Right. Certainly you can also always call 311 and they will get to us. But you're welcome to call direct as well.
Sir?
So you spoke of the complexity of this issue, and the question I have, as this moves to the next layer, the next meeting, what are your opinions, or are you able to talk about it, and do they inform the people prior to that meeting, or are you part of that meeting to where you can give your opinions of what we just presented to you?
We will be part of that meeting. So I think we probably shouldn't give opinions until we hear all the evidence. I mean, we heard a lot tonight. And when I said it's not complex, I didn't mean there aren't a lot of issues. What I meant was the text change is pretty simple. We can understand it. But the question of whether it's a good text change or a bad text change, and the map amendment is good or bad, we'll hear a lot more evidence. And so I urge the other commissioners, hear the evidence first before you reach conclusions. I have practiced law, a lot of which was representing cities, and it was always so disturbing when the judge would make up his mind in the first 10 minutes of a 4-month trial without hearing the evidence. And I hope we will hear all the evidence before we reach conclusions. I have often heard the beginning and then lots of additional testimony, and I've discovered I better keep my mind open.
And I think I'm sorry to interrupt, but that reminds me of something. The Wednesday meeting is a plan commission. If you want to submit something ahead of time so that the commissioners can see it before time, Craig, when do you need it before that Wednesday?
Yeah, I need it the Friday prior, so the Plan Commission meeting is the 9th of November. I would need it the 4th of November by noon, by 12 noon, and that way it gets into the packet so they have about 5 days to review the material.
Sometimes there's a lot of material. They will scan it if they can or copy it, and we get it Friday night. All of us have full-time employment. We try to get it read before the meeting. We will all have seen the site also. Yes, sir.
On the signatures that we collected that needs to be acknowledged by those who collected them, we have one person that will be overseas. Is there a way we can come over to the city and have
that person acknowledge the signatures, because it represents about a fourth of the signatures collected? The person is here tonight and could acknowledge tonight, but otherwise we don't want to run into a technicality that we lose a number of signatures because the person is overseas for 2 weeks. We were 4 to 6 people that collected, and we're generally all present, but we'd like to, since you acknowledged that from the beginning of the meeting, to make sure we understand what we must do to make sure that our signatures count.
Ask that person to go in front of a notary or someone that can take an oath and swear or acknowledge they saw each of those signatures being made, like the form that you would use in a petition to get on a ballot. And given the circumstances, I'll ask the board to accept that. I don't know what they'll do, but I think then we would have a sworn statement, as our evidence has to be under oath, that someone saw it, and we will take that.
City clerk's office has 2 notaries that they're open during business hours except from 1 to 2, but they can just walk in and have that notarized right there if that's convenient for them here at the city.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. In terms of procedure and next steps, can you say anything about the influence of neighborhood groups or associations on the decision-making process at any level?
I will only say a little bit.
Basically, does our voice count is what I'd like to know.
The zoning board and the plan commission should make recommendations based on the standards and the testimony. There are no standards for the city council for amendments. They are elected officials. We all see you. And we acknowledge that you're here and that means you have some opinions that are strong. So technically we'll address the standards and then we'll try to show how our recommendation is related to the standards. But you should know, I see you, everyone else sees you, and that will happen at the next meeting too. So maybe it's a non-answer, but maybe it will help. Would you say that's accurate?
Sir, this is just a simple little 88-year-old woman who's lived 58 years on Hillside Road. Wouldn't it be simple to have some people from the city come and witness what we're talking about, rather than making this big complex thing? It is extremely dangerous. And fortunately, there was a change of light on Crawford. But people that are not familiar with the fact that when we can go, the traffic zooms through.
Well,
and unless you are familiar with that stop, experience it for yourself. We can talk and talk and talk.
The state law says we should conduct a hearing and listen, make decisions based on the hearing. I'm so glad you came. I recognize it's difficult. Everyone on the board is thrilled to be in Evanston and cares about Evanston, or we wouldn't be spending the time. But we can't go out. The elected officials can go have conversations, and I'm delighted in Evanston that they do. It helps. Thank you much.
Quick question.
I think you said the evidence is incomplete.
Well,
is there something we should do better at the next meeting?
The map amendment and this are related. Maybe some people commented about the map amendment. We don't have any comments from Chase about the map amendment and their experts. And when we have that, someone might want to respond. You guys and ladies might have ideas between now and then, but clearly, at least clear to me, there's more information that will be relevant. And to the extent people are testifying about facts, they're giving evidence, and we have to get it under oath. So we'll be more formal and ask people to raise their right hand and all that stuff. Just 2 more comments, and then we should go
Will
to
the
the next item.
city be sharing the potential revenue of the bank versus the gas station with us?
You can ask them.
Ask who? Bank?
That too, but also see if the city has any information about it. And it would be common for an applicant to do some presentations about that. Not about the gas station, but about how much revenue the city will receive, because that's always good for the city. But you can ask the city. Dennis?
Is it on record how much the city received from the gas station?
Not aware of a record to that extent, and I don't think if we had that information, we could disclose it by state law. But on your broader question, in terms of revenue, I think Chairman Peters' response, that we would look to Chase to present what the fiscal impact of the proposed development would be, given that it's a bank, that would, I would think, principally be property tax and not sales tax in that regard. But we can certainly give you an idea of what a gas station site would generate for the city, of that square footage. But I mean, that gas station's not been around for 2 to 3 years.
The real estate tax information is all publicly available. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Sorry, at the next meeting, would it be possible for Chase to present a different footprint of their plan?
It is always possible for an applicant to change their application, but sometimes it may require that a new notice go out to the public, and then the matter would have to be continued. So there's notice requirements that may be triggered by a change that's substantial.
Okay, my question relates to change. Someone had mentioned possibly changing the drive-throughs from Crawford to Grosse Pointe Road, and since I live on Grosse Pointe Road, I would want to be prepared to speak to that specifically.
I believe I was the one who stated that, and we were talking about the possibility of holding a zoning joint special use application with that, and that's part of the reason we were saying we don't want to have that because of design issues. I think it goes back to the question at hand, whether it's 3 lanes or 2 lanes. Right now, the discussion is a drive-through appropriate as a prohibited use or not as a prohibited use? So that's what the focus on. If it is again, hypothetically determined to be a allowable use through a special use permit, then design issues can be talked about at that later date with, again, notice and hearings specifically on the design issues. But right now we're focusing on the macro level. And by focusing on that, we don't have to worry about design, noticing and changing hearing dates and everything like that.
The number of drive-through lanes is not before us.
No, but it might be less offensive to some people if the drive-through lanes were switched to Grosse Pointe Road. That could shift more emphasis to the neighbors on the Grosse Pointe Road side. If you see what I mean.
No, I understand. Stuart?
Tonight is simply the first step in what I see as a very lengthy discourse involving you, the public, involving members of the Plan Commission, involving Chase Bank. Many questions like the one you just asked about the number of lanes will be raised. And presumably in 2 or 3 or 4 months from now, all of the questions that you ask and that we ask will be answered. And then we will be in a position to make a decision and to advise the council of our opinion. So we can't answer everything tonight. This is just stage 1.
Usually they're interested in the reason for our conclusion. But in any case, state law requires the hearing and all of that, so we'll do it.
Well, there's a question to staff. Is staff aware of the congestion that has resulted as a result of Starbucks? And if staff is aware of that, has staff also conducted any traffic impact analysis of their own? Or is this going to be the only traffic impact analysis that we look at?
The area in question has been a constant focus of the City Transportation Division in terms of assessment. They've been part of a meeting with Chase to talk about the study, and also we've not received a final draft of the study, but we anticipate receiving that, and then our traffic engineer and our Director of Transportation will go through that very thoroughly along with the planning staff as well. And if there are additional pieces of information we need, we'll request those.
And also to speak to the concern, the special use permit that went in for the Subway, all fast food restaurants in the city need special use permits. That went through a public hearing, and that was one of the considerations. And technically, the special use permit for that Subway, it's not allowed to. It's not supposed to be open before 9 a.m. We are in discussions because we understand that it's not been occurring, but part of the reason that conditions were placed on that is because of the traffic that exists there.
And then to Dennis, we will be able to actually get our hands on a report from the engineer attesting to what his findings are with respect to additional impact that will come as a result of Chase opening up.
Absolutely. The staff, the city traffic engineers review and analysis will be made available to the Plan Commission, be a public document as well. We can also request that he be here to be able to respond to questions and make a brief presentation.
I have two questions to staff. Are there any retrospective studies conducted? For example, when Starbucks applied for the zoning or for the drive-through, there was probably a traffic study. Was there a study afterwards to see what the actual impact was relative to the forecasted one? And the second one is someone mentioned that there was a higher increase of higher rate of accidents in the intersection. Can we see a map with all the accidents reported in the immediate vicinity?
We can certainly make that request of our traffic engineer, and I'm sure he can provide what he has in that regard. I'm not aware of an increase in accidents, but I've not seen the data in that regard. I think the issue with the Starbucks has been more internal to the Starbucks lot, when sometimes at peak time in the morning where cars will back a bit in line into near some of the parking lanes as well. I'm not aware of that being a major impact on the streets, but I'm not the traffic engineer, so we'll have the traffic engineer address that.
I'm going to try to move to the next item.
Can I just say something though about
Sure.
that lot? When Kenny the Cleaners opened up, 8 months ago, that's when the lot more than exceeded its size. I mean, we walk to Starbucks because you can't drive there, so not to blame it on Starbucks or Subway, but it's also Kenny the Cleaners. There's just not enough parking for that traffic area, and so that's got to be discussed in this new traffic.
In the morning, the staff will be here. In the evening, many times the alderman will be here. They can answer more questions. Thank you all for coming. I guess we should take another 5-minute break so you can leave. Next week they can hate us.
Well. Craig, do you need this? Yes. I sent you one on an email, but it's okay. I just want to dot my.
It doesn't.
So how can you have it?
It doesn't
like
become.
this?
It doesn't become moot. Because even if you deny the drive-through, the question of whether those other lots are commercial.
Fine, but the point is.
So we're not sub-area, including Sardinas. That whole area is 6 a.m. If you determine that drive-throughs are we want to protect it. Now all of a sudden, landing all of that property. Yeah, you can only do a small residential house. Probably do a 15-unit. But if you have just the singles, let's say she takes out
Can I ask those members of the public here that are not here on bed and breakfast to talk in the foyer, and then we can speak to an empty chamber?
I just remembered.
Thanks.
I figured.
Sure. If you want to just leave one, if you think you have some use for it, because we'll get one in the record. Okay. Thanks. We are now on the bed and breakfast item. And there's a complication, which I'll ask staff to explain in terms of something pending in front of City Council.
Oh, sure, it's the 300 church thing, right?
Good evening, Dominic Argamello, zoning planner. This is in regards to 11 PLND-0026, a text amendment to the zoning ordinance. This is a discussion of amending the bed and breakfast definition in Chapter 18 of the zoning ordinance. Specifically, the owner-occupied portion of the definition is the focus for further clarification. This was referred to the zoning committee by Alderman Nguyen of the City Council's, and this was referred out of the special use application at 300 Church for a bed and breakfast. That is still before the City Council has been introduced, an ordinance has been introduced and subsequently amended. At the next City Council meeting, it is up for action on a there's been discussion about continuing this discussion of the definition past when a decision has been made at City Council to, in essence, avoid any appearance of conflicts.
Several members of staff have told me that the custom in Evanston has been, and I know the custom in other cities, if there's a definition or something similar part of the ordinance, and that's being relied on by the council in making a decision, or not relied on, depending on what they're thinking. Often, the custom has been for the Plan Commission to continue its deliberation on a proposed change until the council makes a decision on the specific item with specific property. It's not a rule. It's not a legal requirement. It's simply been custom. So we don't interfere with what they're doing. And they are the superior body in terms of decision making. Some would say, and I seem to aldermen tonight, they are the superior body. But certainly in terms of decision making, we don't want to interfere with what they're doing. And some people argue these are different. So I bring this before you so we can decide if that's an appropriate process. I think there were some people who were going to speak to it that aren't here because I said it would probably be continued. Alderman?
Thank you very much and good evening. Alderman Nguyen made this reference at council, which is why it's before you. It is in my ward, and we're going to ask you to move ahead, regardless of what your practice has been, to move ahead with your consideration of revising the definition of bed and breakfast in the zoning ordinance. Is there anything I can answer for you about what's currently before the council? Or
would our decision, assuming this gets to the Plan Commission, would our decision have any impact on the 300 church decision?
No.
How do you know?
I'm sure it wouldn't. The 300 church decision has been introduced at the last council meeting, and it's up for action at the next council meeting in 2 weeks.
But there's still some open questions, right, that will be presented to the council.
I think as amended, as the Planning and Development Committee amended it, I think we've answered all of the questions. It will probably come in for a yes or no vote at the next council meeting.
Probably. And that's my problem with it, because
it's not going to be tabled. I don't think there's any intention of tabling it. It's been discussed for a long time. We, frankly, have seen, and I don't know whether you're familiar with the ZBA decision on this particular item, but there are some real questions about whether or not the definition that we've relied on in the zoning ordinance, and remember, this is the first bed and breakfast application we've ever had since the zoning ordinance was adopted in 1993. And we see some shortcomings in it. We see some unintended consequences. And so we're asking your committee to consider that. We know that your deliberations and the Plan Commission deliberations are going to last much longer than this issue at City Council. But we feel that it's really imperative to get this discussion underway.
Commissioners? Or I guess committee members?
Well, okay, you mentioned a minute ago that what actually is driving the need to change the definition?
I think one of the main things is that there's a question about what ownership really means. We have not defined ownership of a bed and breakfast, I think, very well in the zoning ordinance. In this particular situation, what is happening is that an LLC is taking over ownership. The 98% owner of the property does not live on site. The 1% owner of the 1% partner in the LLC is going to be the designated live-in owner. I think that is one of the things that is of major concern to us, is that ownership needs to be better defined. Dennis, can you, Dominic?
Let me first ask the Commission, do you wish to go forward?
Yeah, and thank you for that, because I was basically in the dark.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw people discussing this and on this committee here, but I didn't know what was actually driving this, and it makes sense. I think it ought to go forward.
Right, thank you very much.
Let me see if there are comments on going forward.
I do have a comment. Let us suppose that the Plan Commission settles on a new definition of owner as it applies to bed and breakfasts. Would not the council then be free, absent a decision on the 300 church petition, to adopt the new definition and say that it does not square with the applicant's petition?
I think in regard to the 300 church, that would be grandfathered in at that point.
Well, are you guessing, or are you absolutely certain about that?
I'm looking to staff for an answer. I'm not an attorney.
That's my understanding is, and Ken Cox, city assistant attorney, is not here, but as the application was taken in under a definition and granted a certificate of zoning compliance as eligible for the special use under that definition, that would then move forward. But Scott Peters is the, I think, most esteemed, can answer that question.
I deny esteemed, but I do admit to being a lawyer that practices in this field. And it would take me some time to know if it's legal non-conforming use.
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So one is, why the rush? Are we receiving a flurry of bed and breakfast applications?
We may.
We may. Okay. Is there any basis for this belief that we may? It's the first one since 1993.
No, we believe that there is the possibility of more applications coming forward, and we really feel that we need to have this definition on the books before any more come in.
Second, I don't see a problem with the percentage of ownership. An owner is an owner, so I don't understand what the problem is.
Well, there's a problem.
If we go forward, I'll ask Dennis to address it.
Yeah, okay.
A little bit complicated with LLC, and then we'll take testimony from anyone in the room that wants to talk, and including the alderman, and then either you'll know or not.
Yeah, I don't see the rush.
I mean, no matter what we do tonight, it doesn't get decided tonight. There's a long process. Maybe not as long as the one in the last item, but so
is the question of ownership being tied in to where the owner resides in the B&B as opposed to off-site? Okay, so that's an issue worth discussing.
We should go forward then.
Yes.
Okay. Can you talk about this? Thank you.
Hi, Dominic Argamello, zoning planner again. Again, this was referred to as as an aldermanic request by Alderman Nguyen. In your packet, on the last two pages, there is under background, there's the definition for owner, and there is the definition for bed and breakfast. The owner's definition states any full or part owner, joint owner, tenant common, tenant partnership, joint tenant, or tenant by the entirety with legal or beneficial title to the whole or part of a structure of land. The bed and breakfast definition then talks about owner occupied. The case that came before the Zoning Board of Appeals was for a bed and breakfast at this one site, bought by three people that would own the following percentages in the bed and breakfast entity. One would own 98%, and two others would own 1%. With one of the 1% owners living on site, as they are a partial owner of the property, they met the bed and breakfast definition of an owner-occupied single-family home. Over the course of the hearing, even though it was recommended for approval to the City Council, it was stated that there was a lot of members had questions about the actual intent of the owner-occupied definition, and the thought that a bed and breakfast was actually to be mom and pop who were renting out a couple of rooms in their aspect. The testimony at the Zoning Board of Appeals was concerned that, in essence, franchises could be opened up with 1% owners throughout the area. But that's some of the testimony I recall from attending those Zoning Board of Appeals hearings. The reference, Alderman Fisk can speak to what the reference specifically was, but the concern I recall from the Zoning Board of Appeals was the intent of a owner-occupied was somebody who was the majority owner of their home and renting it out. Like my wife and I own a home, and we would be renting it out. We own it, we don't share it with somebody else, and we would be renting out 3 rooms rather than a 1% owner, which then opens the testimony that spoke to opening some concerns about different partial owners throughout a neighborhood or something like that.
The way I
that's just my recollection.
I sort of look at this is owner would be something other than a natural person, like a corporation.
Mm-hmm. I just want to clarify, it was a very confusing case at 300 Church. The ZBA did recommend to deny. I remember now, Alderman Fisk is correct. It was a 1-4 vote to deny. The person that recommended approval had several conditions placed on it. That's right. It was, ZBA did recommend to deny that specific application. I just want to clarify.
The owner-occupied appears, some people think the intent is that it refers to natural persons who own it and live there. What if it's some other type of entity and a natural person has a tiny percent? I think that's the ambiguity that brings it here. Ma'am?
I wanted to say just one other thing, and that is that in this particular case where the concern arose was this is a single-family house in an R1 zone that is going to be, the entire house is going to be devoted to its use as a bed and breakfast. And this is where we're crossing the line between what was, I believe, intended in 1993 when we created the bed and breakfast use, which, as Dominic said, was interpreted to be mom and pop with a couple of kids gone to college. They have a couple of bedrooms. There may be Northwestern parents coming along who want to, a place to stay, and why don't we open up our rooms to them? And this will be a great way to bring in a little bit of extra money. That's not what is happening in this case. This is, in fact, crossing the line into almost a guest hotel, and that's when Alderman Nguyen and I were considering this. I think it's the model in Madison, Wisconsin, where they actually define owner and owner-occupant as a 51% owner of a property would be considered the owner-occupant of a bed and breakfast, and that's what we don't have here. So we see the possibility of some of the larger homes, perhaps in Evanston, becoming attractive to investors who establish LLCs and then put in an employee perhaps as a 1% partner in the LLC. Under our code, that 1% partner becomes an owner. And suddenly we have more houses that are not occupied by families, no kids in school, not part of the neighborhood, but really are being run as small guest hotels. And I don't think that was the intention of the discussion that created the bed and breakfast in 1993, and it hasn't been tested until now. And now we can see some of the consequences, and that's why we're coming back to you to say we believe that the ownership needs to be better defined, and the 51% is probably a good way to do that.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this? Please come forward. Thank you for waiting so long.
My name is David Reynolds. I live at 204 Davis Street. A residential, an R1 residential neighborhood has certain aspects to it, and commercialization is not one of them. I don't know that any of us is terribly opposed to all B&Bs, but we feel that in this case, where a definition of an owner has been defined as any fraction of 100%, opens up any residential neighborhood to a commercialization, a commercial use. And I do think that you should give some serious thought to defining what an owner is, and obviously I think it should be at least 50%, if not more. I'd like to have you go slightly beyond that, though, and consider another aspect of B&Bs, and that is the bunching of B&Bs. This B&B was initially part of a proposal for 2 B&Bs in the same block. And for reasons that I'm not fully clear to me, the second B&B, just 2 doors down, was not pursued, but by the same owner. I think that you should designate a distance between B&Bs in order to not allow them to congregate in a small area. My thought is that they should be at least 1,500 feet apart. And thirdly, I think that a special use for a B&B should run with the ownership and not with the land. I think that should be a condition of the ordinance. I know that a number of special uses have been issued where the use is issued to the owner and not to the land, and I think that that should be the case with a B&B. In this case, obviously, the person who's doing this B&B is going to do a wonderful job of it, of renovating the house, and I'm sure will run a very discreet business. But I think he's one in a large number of people who's capable of doing that. And if you, it seems to me over the years that I've been involved in zoning matters in Evanston, despite Mr. Peters, your feeling or your thought that it's the law that is finally adhered to. Emotion goes into it, and I've seen a lot of cases decided where emotion has been a real factor. If you take this case of 300 Church, a very reputable person with great assets, but down the road he may want to sell it. If not this B&B, another B&B that's perhaps less well funded. And then the community doesn't have any control over the type of person that is going to run it. So my opinion is that you should make the special use run with the person, with the ownership entity, and not with the land. Thank you very much.
Anyone else wish to speak? Do you want to talk about this? I wish we could often make things run to the person. The Illinois Supreme Court has reached a different conclusion, that it violates equal protection to tie a special use to a person. Now, I'm not here as a lawyer, so I will ask staff to get an opinion from our law department, just so that everyone has an understanding of the applicable case law. they don't pay me for that stuff. And maybe it's changed since I looked at it. But there were such cases. I understand what you're saying. And I think it's often relevant and may be determinative of decisions.
Just to further clarify and get all the testimony that I recall out. Once again, bed and breakfasts are always a special use where they are allowed in the city. In R1, I believe, through our 3 districts, maybe even R4, but they're always special. All the residential districts, they're only allowed as a special use district. I recall there being some concern about the congregation of bed and breakfasts at the Zoning Board of Appeal, and I remember one Zoning Board of Appeal member pointing to the standards for special use, and specifically Standard C, which states that for any special use that comes through, it will not cause a negative cumulative effect when its effect is considered in conjunction with the cumulative effect of various special uses of all types in the immediate neighborhood. I just to remember some testimony that I do recall. As members had concerns about the owner-occupied, but also wanted to have various opinions put forth. And also included in your packet, there was the general standards we have from Zoning Code 647 of the bed and breakfast establishments, which lists some of the considerations in terms of maximum bedrooms allowed, maximum stay, cooking limitations stuff. What we noticed for was specifically speaking about the owner-occupied portion of the bed and breakfast definition per the request. Thank you.
Have there been any studies or policy work done on this question by the staff?
No. If you're referring to Dominic's most recent comment about cumulative effect of bed and breakfast, there's only one.
I was thinking more generally about practices in other cities, problems in other cities where there are already bed and breakfasts. We don't have much experience here.
Correct. There has been references made, as Alderman Fisk did, to places like Madison and others, but there's not been any staff study in that regard.
Ms. Feldman, did you have? So Ms. Feldman, who didn't have a microphone, notes there were 2 bed and breakfasts,
Alderman Wins addressed that in the council.
But they had not been officially approved, and they did not apply. I know there was one on Maple because it was across the alley from me. But maybe there are others. Yeah. Does the council have, the subcommittee have any ideas as to how they might want to proceed with this? We don't have language in front of us, but certainly we can decide if there's a policy direction we should go, maybe craft language tonight, maybe have that done at the commission level. Stuart?
I have a question of Alderman Fisk, if I may. You referred to the intent in 1993. Could you tell me what that intent was?
Yes, and perhaps you know Mary Singh, who has lived in the neighborhood for a long time, and who was one of the citizen members on the citizen committee who worked on the 1993 zoning ordinance. And she, I believe, she testified to the fact that during the citizen deliberations and consideration of bed and breakfast, it was, as I alluded to, that it was intended to be a mom and pop bringing in a little bit of extra money, renting out a couple of bedrooms to perhaps Northwestern parents who are coming in town to attend a football game. It was never envisioned as a commercial entity. The other point that I think,
but it is a commercial entity. If they bring people in and derive income from that, by definition, it's a commercial enterprise.
But it's not the same as turning over the entire structure of a building to only
so it's a
people
question
attending.
of degree. It's a question of degree.
Yeah, it is a question of degree. And it's also, this is going to be operating 365 days a year. They're putting several $1 million into renovating the building. At ZBA, they talked about how long it would take actually to get a return on the investment of the building. They're going to actively be marketing this for not only people who are going to be coming to stay overnight, but also special events. And that was part of the discussion about the impact of this type of use on the neighborhood. That's not before you tonight. You don't need to think about that. That was part of the discussion at ZBA, over which they had a concern along with parking. So this is a more intensive use. This means that the owner-operator is going to live in an apartment in the basement. And that raises concerns for me also in other neighborhoods that are close to the university, where we've been working, 3 of the aldermen, who, including myself, who have concerns about substandard housing for students, are also concerned about housing anyone in the basement. In this particular case, the ZBA said that they must remove the kitchen that they had proposed to put in the basement. That was going to be a separate apartment for the owner-occupant.
Do you have a draft of a proposed definition here?
I don't have a draft, and that would be something that I would want to talk to Alderman Nguyen about and the law department, because I believe I'm interested in David Reynolds' comments tonight, but our concern was mainly with the percentage of owner occupancy, because we think that's what drives the difference between a mom and pop bed and breakfast hangout, a shingle, and
How about corporate status? Would it have to be a natural person, or would a corporation
No, I think
be okay?
if someone wanted to do an LLC and be a 51% owner, and that 51% owner was going to be the owner-operator and live permanently in the building, perhaps there is a family who would want to establish that type of entity. I can see that happening.
Okay. So percentage ownership is your key point?
Yes, percentage ownership is the key point.
Arpuda?
And that may change. Alderman Nguyen had to leave earlier tonight. She was in the Economic Development Committee meeting, but I was running back and forth to talk to her. So,
it seems to me that there are 2 things we would need to address based on what you've told us. Number 1 is the percentage of ownership, and if we're talking mom and pop, I mean, if that's the original intent and that's what we want to adhere to, then it's 100%, isn't it?
Well,
together?
Yeah, if mom and pop both own the property.
Well, it's 100%.
Yes.
So, I think it's a little premature for us to come up with language until we know what the intent should be. If it's a mom and pop, it's 100%. If it's mom but not pop, and pop, the other 49% is owned by some corporate entity, that might not fit your intent either. So I really think it's premature without having something specific to react to for us to start crafting language here tonight. Then it becomes our intent as to what it should be, rather than the city council's intent as to what it should be.
Right, but that's why we come to you, because you have the expertise. You are the first step on the road, and 51% is what is in the ordinances of other communities, and that's why we looked at that.
All right, but that's something different than mom and pop.
Not necessarily. I mean,
Being mom and pop means 100%.
It addresses the problem that we have, that we can see coming down the road.
My recollection is that Ms. Singh's your description of what she said is consistent with my memories from the hearing so long ago, 1993. I think what was passed is what's in the ordinance, and what the committee must do is decide if there's a problem. and how to remedy it. But I think we have an idea of what two aldermen, that they believe there's a problem coming, given
Yes,
the
I agree
present
with that.
definition, and then we have to think about what is that problem, and if there's a problem, what is the problem? How can it be remedied?
Okay, the other thing, though, is occupancy.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me we're not just talking about how much ownership should ownership be for us not to have the commercialization, the over-commercialization aspect. And then the second aspect of it is, what is occupancy? Is occupancy a person, a couple, a family who lives permanently in the building and not in a basement where a kitchen and John are thrown in to make it, halfway comfortable? And if that's the case, I think we also have to come up with a definition of occupancy. What is occupancy? What is ownership?
I think you're correct. And then we have the changes in the American family.
No.
In terms
of... Yeah, of course.
If you're thinking of husband and wife, and do they have to stay married? And what if they're separated and not married?
Well, that's
and
why
so
mom and pop
50%?
doesn't do it for me.
I mean, there's those kinds of things that we need to look at so it doesn't come back straight away. Gentlemen?
Yeah, Alderman Fisk. I guess my assumption is that if the ownership stake is 51%, then it is less likely that a corporate entity will be hiding behind.
Right.
And as a result of that, we will actually have the occupant actually be the owner, or have be the owner, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I understand your 51%.
Right.
And the other thing is that typically when you go to a mom and pop place, the mom and pop don't live in one bedroom basement with a little hotel on them.
Right.
And again, I hear what you're saying. I think it's more of an intent.
Mm-hmm.
The question is this: when this was crafted in '93, did anybody expect that there'll be LLCs coming with somebody having 1% and 1% ownership and still calling it mom and pops? And I don't think that was basically expected. I think this is something that has come up. Now the question becomes this: as a board or as a unit, are we satisfied with what is happening here, or this is something that ought to be tackled? And I think the next step really ought to be: does this go to, the Plan Commission? Or, I think we know what is happening here, and the question becomes, what do we do?
One more comment. To me, what seems to be the substantive issue is the intensity of the use, and whether it's a mom and pop living in one bedroom or a corporation.
Right.
Here you have. I don't see why people don't take an issue with 647B, where you say 5 bedrooms. 5 bedrooms out of how many? Why is that set as a number of bedrooms?
I think there's more than intensity. There's the relationship between the people in control and the property, which is different for absentee operators than it is for people who view this as their home. Or it may be different. It's certainly not different all the time.
We should hope. It cuts in favor of people who live in the property, but it's not always the case if you've been in many bed and breakfasts around the country. But the issue of intensity seems to be a major issue relative to the issue of property.
Certainly if the maximum number of rooms had been 3 instead of 5, I don't think we would have this matter before us at the council. 3 bedrooms is not an attractive number.
Out of how many? This is
well, in this case, it's 5 bedrooms out of 5 bedrooms.
Why is it not set as a percentage of the bedrooms instead of, because you can have houses with 4 bedrooms, you say 5, the entire house is a bedroom.
And that's a really good point, because that would set aside at least part of the main part of the house, not the basement, for the owner-occupant.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe that's...
This question of owner occupancy bothers me. For those that have stayed at a number of B&Bs, both in this country and outside, it's not unusual for the owner to live next door. The only thing that's required, aside from a good room at a good price, is that they be there to make your breakfast, and they be on call 24/7 and be able to get over if there's an emergency in 5 or 10 minutes. So I'm not sure this thing about the them living on site, I think we really have to visit that quite a bit and make a decision. If I own the building next door and I'm there, what's the difference if I'm physically 20 feet away or living in the house? As far as what we, unless what your intent was, if we can narrow that down, then we can craft around it.
Then that becomes a hotel. I think that's the difference. Is the intent of the bed and breakfast is that you have someone there who, a mom and pop again, who lives in the house, who is welcoming you into the house, who is going to be there on call. It's the attractiveness of beds and breakfasts is that you're actually staying in someone's home. You're not staying in a commercial structure. And I think we, going down the road, I think it's a good idea for us to consider the category of a guest hotel. I mean, when does a B&B stop being a B&B? And I think that's an excellent point.
Did I see motions from Craig that you want to speak?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we've got all the positions. We don't have all the possible positions, but we certainly don't have a unified position. What will help?
I would like to see a draft. I mean, you're essentially asking the commission to change a definition.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see a draft, and I think that you have to make the case that a change is warranted. Mm-hmm. I may very well be persuaded that you're right, but I think you've got to be prepared to make the case, and I'd like to start with a draft from you.
Okay. Well, it'll be from the law department.
I don't think we're ready for a draft. I think a draft will indicate, working backwards from a proposed definition, will help us understand what is thought to be accomplished. But I think we don't have clarity among this group or the Plan Commission about what's the best way to accomplish it. And I'm not so clear yet about what is to be accomplished, though I think I understand. And maybe we need to look at more than Madison to try and figure out how do you allow a bed and breakfast, which I think is often desirable, in a way that won't cause harm to the residential area. And the economics will probably drive it to larger places. How do we protect the area from that? My recollection back when the zoning ordinance was redrafted, comprehensive redrafting, nobody thought about this. Nobody talked about it. I worked with the drafters. Never occurred to any of us that this combination of definitions would result in a bed and breakfast where the people running it weren't the owners of the house or whatever part wasn't mortgaged. No one thought about it. And I think, you said you would hope they care about it.
Yeah.
It's like an owner that's living there and cares about the neighborhood. I would hope so too. It's not so clear to me yet how to do that, how to talk about it. I know you guys are busy. And I'm not sure best practices is the answer, but
we certainly can take a look at other communities if that's your request.
I would be interested in the experience of other communities, especially if you have you discover some things where there's been a problem. I mean, when I think about student housing, Evanston, Bloomington, Indiana, near the university in Minnesota,
Even Hyde Park.
and so on and so forth. A little less in Hyde Park because the stock is so heavily built. There are sort of consistent problems.
There are no good hotels, though, in Hyde Park.
But, and maybe that happens with bed and breakfast too. Certainly there's a worry that it's going to happen. So maybe we should start not only best practices, but also worst practices. What has caused problems, especially in the college community, where the demand is sort of unique, the transience is sort of unique, a little different than in the city of Chicago. I know it's a hard assignment. Maybe it would help.
Do we, or is it the intention to license B&Bs?
I think they're licensed now, but we've never had one. Yeah,
Yes.
we've never had one.
They're required to be licensed. First of all, they have to be approved through a special use process in those districts that we referred to earlier. And they also have to have a license, annual license, if I'm not mistaken, from the health department.
I guess my concern is once you license one, whether you would have reviews at certain periods of time to make sure the ownership continues as you intend, and that somebody who, a mom and pop operation, don't in midstream after they're going, sell it to where the entity is not what you intended.
Well, that's where I think we tie it. We tie the special use to the owner, and I understand what you're saying about that.
And we can tie it to the type of owner or where they're living.
And in the case of 300 Church Street, I mean, that's basically what the council has done, is that it's tying the use actually to the owner-operator. So if the 98% owner divests himself of the property, the bed and breakfast can continue to operate so long as one particular owner-operator who is the owner-operator at the time of the divestiture remains in place. I don't know how Dennis is going to write that, but he's going to write it for the next council meeting. But the other point that I wanted to make, too, is part of the problem is that, as those of you know, an LLC can add or subtract members as it wishes, and add or subtract partners. So with that type of partnership, we're never really sure who is going to be the owner-occupant and operator of the LLC. It can change. It can change every month. So again, it's part of the problem that we've discussed, that ZBA identified. We ultimately, I think the interest of myself as ward alderman and Alderman Wynn, who has a very similar ward to the first ward, is that we preserve the residential character and quality of the neighborhood, because that's what keeps your property values high. That's where we get all of your lovely tax dollars. It's where people want to live and raise their children. We're very fortunate that this particular B&B that's proposed for 300 Church Street has all the money that it will ever need to be a wonderful facility. But again, as Mr. Reynolds alluded to, if this becomes an attractive business venture for one person, it's going to happen for others. And we're concerned that the domino effect of this will tend to be something that we didn't anticipate, that we didn't want.
In some circumstances, a moratorium is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Hard legal problems to avoid you taking,
Mm-hmm.
but if you think there's a rash of, there's some reason to think there's a rash of things and the time frame is reasonable and limited, that's always possible. I won't say always, but staff and law will tell you.
Right. I think we've identified where we believe the problem is and where we think tweaking needs to happen. I think the fact that we had unlicensed Bs and Bs, if there were 3 or more, just attests to the fact that a mom and pop B&B is not a money-making venture. You have to do it for other reasons. And maybe you read too much Martha Stewart magazines, or for some reason people at some point in the early 90s were attracted to that. But the fact that we don't have any operating B&Bs now is they just simply don't make money. The way they do make money, and I think it'll be interesting to watch this particular bed and breakfast, is if it's operating at the maximum capacity all year round. And that is a different impact on a residential neighborhood than we've seen before. And that's where, in my mind, as I've thought about this and thought about what's the best approach, it keeps coming back to me, a guest hotel. And we may want to change the zoning ordinance to allow for that. But that's down the road, and we need to think about that. But we've learned a lot since 1993.
I just wanted to come back briefly. Bedroom question.
Mm-hmm.
And 5 bedrooms is a lot
Mm-hmm.
of guest rooms to
Right.
be operating every night, all year round.
And I don't know, maybe some of you who were here then can remember why that number was selected. I don't know why.
Is there a parking requirement?
There is a parking requirement if it's new construction or if there's net square footage added. The parking requirement, basically in terms of an existing situation, this was a debated issue at 300 Church. They have 3 spaces on site, but 5 bedrooms. So what they're going to do is lease 1 space from an adjoining parcel and then also valet the 5th car if needed. But there, if you look at the B&B language, that page of the ordinance, that page and a half, they can meet their parking requirements by parking at the curb in front of the property, which is a bit unusual.
Is there further discussion?
Well, I've got a question to staff. Maybe Dennis and Craig, maybe you guys can help. Well, when I read this, I see the intent, along with my own understanding of what a bed and breakfast is. I also see that the way it is written, it makes it possible for somebody to basically use the loopholes to circumvent having to actually go out and establish a full-fledged boutique hotel or something of that sort. Since it appears that at least my suspicion may be somebody may be going around this. I mean, what can we do in terms of cleaning up the definition of what actually constitutes a bed and breakfast?
Yeah, to clarify, the current owner definition in the zoning ordinance that's applicable across all issues is that a partial owner, meets the test of owner, so 1% owner does meet that test. But I think that's for the committee to deliberate on in terms of, is there a different threshold that should be added for bed and breakfast? It would also be good to have the law department opine on that in terms of some equal protection issues. I think a case can be made based on impact. Potential impact is why a particular class could be treated differently, but that's more a discussion among lawyers, and we would bring Ken Cox to that discussion.
What fun we have with those kinds of things. It's difficult. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for your consideration.
Started because more complicated than I would have thought.
But it's also, how many years? 18 years that we've had our zoning ordinance. And as we go along, we refine things. And I think 18 years is a nice long time that things seem to have been working fairly well. And now we have a situation, and we'll work together to figure out the best way to approach it.
Thank you. There are 2 other items which are not on the agenda. Dennis has announced his departure.
Dennis?
Not Dennis, Dominic.
Oh.
He's one of those D people. Sorry. I don't have knowledge unavailable to you.
Never mind.
Yeah, never mind. And I want to thank you and get a round of applause for you from the commission.
what you're going to be doing?
I'll be, right now I'm just going to be transitioning. I'm going to be a stay-at-home father for a 6-month-old. My wife has a new position that allows us this flexibility, and very much looking forward to it. It's our first child, and it just makes a lot of sense for our family, and definitely a wonderful, wonderful opportunity.
Mazel tov.
Second item is I am not the chairman of this subcommittee. There is no chairman of the subcommittee, and when I last asked, there were no volunteers, but now we have maybe some volunteers so that next time someone else can do it. We'll run a draft between now and the next meeting. Thanks. We'll try again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I enjoyed working with you all.
Is there any further motions, like adjournment?
Move to adjourn.
Seconded. Seconded.
By acclamation, I think.